It wasn't Stefanski. It was Sean McDermott who stepped up to defend Shedeur Sanders. The Buffalo coach didn't have to say much, but what he did say cut through the NFL noise. While praising Sanders' poise and ability to elevate Cleveland's offense, McDermott made clear what many suspect. The Browns head coach isn't backing his quarterback the way a team should. That's not just a leadership misstep, it's a red flag. Stefanski's silence speaks volumes in a league where young QBs live or die by the belief around them.
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
McDermott's words reflect more than professional courtesy. They highlight a glaring philosophical rift between two NFL franchises. One leans into preparation, respect, and resilience. The other hesitates to commit, even as their rookie shows flashes of brilliance. By spotlighting Sanders and affirming his impact, McDermott inadvertently exposed the fragile foundation Stefanski has laid. If Cleveland doesn't act, it may sabotage a career before it ever fully. Sean McDermott didn't just hand out compliments during his press availability. He lit a fire. When asked about upcoming matchups and how his defense would prepare for Cleveland, McDermott made a point to highlight rookie quarterback Shedeur Sanders, not with generic coach speak, but with specific praise that left people raising eyebrows. He said Sanders had elevated the Cleveland offense, called him a dangerous, intelligent quarterback, and emphasized that preparing for him would require the same attention they give to any top-tier threat. That alone would have made headlines. But what made the moment explode was how sharply McDermott's tone contrasted with anything Kevin Stefanski has ever said about Sanders. While one coach on the outside recognized the rookie's talent and leadership, the man actually coaching Sanders barely mustered any substantial praise over weeks of starts. McDermott didn't name names, but the implication was loud and clear. When other teams show more belief in your QB than your own coach, something's broken. Kevin Stefanski has never been the most enthusiastic soundbite, but his avoidance of meaningful commentary on Shedeur Sanders has become more than just awkward. It's suspicious. Asked repeatedly in pressers about Sanders' progress or performance, Stefanski's answers have stayed vague, clipped, and borderline dismissive. A typical Stefanski response might be, he's learning, or he's managing the offense. No excitement, no momentum, just baseline acknowledgement. And this isn't just Stefanski being his usual flat self. Because when other players, especially veterans, make a big play or have a strong game, Stefanski turns on the detail. He talks about preparation, execution, trust. So when it comes to Sanders, the lack of depth in praise feels intentional. It's like there's an invisible ceiling being placed above Sanders' head, and McDermott, whether knowingly or not, just shattered that ceiling with one media session. To his credit, Shedeur Sanders hasn't bit back publicly. He's answered questions with professionalism, stayed focused on execution, and continued to show leadership even in tough situations. But the signs of frustration have slipped through in subtle ways. A pause here, a sidestep there. When asked about trust with the coaching staff, Sanders gave short, generic responses. When asked about what he's learned under Stefanski, the energy in his voice noticeably dropped. Sanders isn't throwing anyone under the bus, but he doesn't need to. Anyone watching can see the mismatch between his effort and the support he's receiving. And when McDermott, a coach with no skin in Cleveland's game, goes out of his way to praise Sanders' impact, it throws a harsh spotlight on the lack of backing from inside his own building. The results on the field back this up. The Browns' offense with Sanders under center has shown real flashes of life. They've moved the ball with more consistency, opened up the field, and taken more risks downfield. But instead of building on that momentum, the play calling has often looked like it's designed to limit him. Screens on 3rd and long, conservative runs after explosive drives, a weird hesitancy to let Sanders actually take over. Game after game, Cleveland's offense looks like it's being coached by someone trying not to lose rather than someone trying to win. And when Sanders does make plays, there's no visible shift in approach. No unlocking of the playbook. Just a quick celebration, and back to the same old tight leash. That's what makes McDermott's comments feel like a direct indictment. He sees a player worth planning for. Stefanski sees a player worth containing. Even McDermott's praise for Myles Garrett fit this narrative. He described Garrett as someone you have to game plan around entirely, noting his dominance and consistency. It was detailed, specific, and full of respect. This is what leadership looks like when you recognize elite talent. You acknowledge it publicly, you challenge your own team to match that energy, and you respect the work that's been put in. This wasn't just about Garrett. It was a glimpse into McDermott's coaching philosophy. When a player earns respect, you show it. When a player elevates the team, you don't pretend otherwise. That level of acknowledgement creates a culture of belief. It sets the tone for preparation and development. The fact that Garrett, despite being on the Browns, received more praise from McDermott than Sanders has received from Stefanski, says McDermott also brought up Trey White, a player who's battled through injuries and remained a cornerstone of Buffalo's defense. He highlighted White's work ethic, mental toughness, and the process of coming back stronger. Again, there was admiration in his tone, a deep respect for the journey, not just the results. The unspoken comparison was hard to miss. While McDermott builds his players up with this kind of language, Stefanski seems allergic to it. Players like Sanders, grinding through adversity, stepping up in tough moments, and still performing under scrutiny, don't get that kind of spotlight from their own head coach. And that absence of support doesn't just affect morale. It shapes the entire trajectory of a young quarterback's career. KS and SS. The relationship between Stefanski and Sanders has now become a focal point. There's been no visible tension on the sidelines, no yelling matches, no dramatic moments. But the distance is there. In interviews, they rarely reference each other with any sense of warmth or personal connection. It's all surface level. And in the NFL, that matters. Quarterbacks thrive when their head coach believes in them, fights for them, builds around them. The McDermott-Sanders moment didn't just expose Stefanski's lack of belief. It showcased what belief actually looks like. Real support isn't vague compliments. It's intentional development. It's putting your quarterback in the best position to win. And right now, it's hard to argue that Stefanski is doing that. Even with limited backing, Sanders has shown growth. He's stayed composed, taken command of the huddle, and found ways to move the ball in key situations. His poise, especially for a rookie, has been one of the few bright spots in an otherwise inconsistent Browns offense. And the stats, while not overwhelming, reflect improvement in pace, tempo, and play extension. But improvement isn't the same as being unleashed. Sanders looks like a quarterback being asked to play cautiously instead of creatively. And when other teams are clearly building game plans to contain him because they see the threat, his own team seems hesitant to let him be that threat. It's a strange dynamic, and it's one that can stall a young career before it even gets rolling. When asked about McDermott's comments, Sanders stayed cool. He thanked him for the kind words and quickly redirected focus to the team's preparation. It was a textbook non-answer, but the difference in tone between that moment and his usual interactions about Stefanski was clear. There was gratitude, humility, and a tiny flicker of relief, like someone finally acknowledged what he's bringing to the table. The bigger question is why that validation has to come from an opponent. Why the most impactful praise Sanders has received this season came not from a teammate, not from a coach, but from a coach trying to beat him. It speaks volumes about what's missing in the Browns organization right now. The silence from within is starting to echo. If Cleveland wants to salvage this situation, it starts at the top. Stefanski doesn't need to become a hype man, but he does need to become a believer. Because continuing to downplay, ignore, or subtly undermine Sanders isn't just bad leadership. It's organizational failure. And that kind of failure doesn't just affect one season. It shapes futures. The NFL is filled with stories of talent wasted by bad systems, stubborn coaches, or toxic environments. And right now, the Browns are at a fork in the road. Do they continue down the path of doubt and hesitation? Or do they recognize the gift they have in Sanders and build around it? If they don't, another team eventually will. And by then, it'll be too late to fix. During practice sessions, It's easy to see the gap between Shedeur Sanders' preparation and the system he's being forced into. He's sharp, vocal, methodical. He doesn't look like a rookie trying to survive. He looks like a player trying to grow into a role that the coaching staff won't fully hand over. Reports from inside the facility note that Sanders often stays late reviewing film, works independently with receivers, and takes initiative beyond what's asked. But those things only matter when the coach puts trust behind the scenes into action on game day. That hasn't been the case. The most visible shift has come not in the offensive scheme, but in the way other teams prepare for him. Defensive coordinators talk about containing his legs, keeping him in the pocket, cutting off the deep ball. That doesn't happen unless they see danger. Stefanski seems to be the only one not seeing it, or worse, ignoring it. Post-game interviews with Kevin Stefanski have become a ritual of deflection. When Sanders has a standout quarter or leads a scoring drive, Stefanski's response is almost mechanical. "We executed a few things well." Or, "The team responded." Rarely does he put the spotlight on his quarterback. It's like there's a built-in wall preventing him from acknowledging what's plain to see. And when Sanders struggles, the tone shifts quickly. Suddenly, it's missed opportunities, rookie mistakes, need to be more consistent. The imbalance is striking. There's no sense of shared accountability, no attempt to insulate the young quarterback from inevitable growing pains. McDermott's praise was powerful not just because it was honest, but because it showed the bare minimum of what support should sound like. There have been games where Sanders has spent long stretches on the sideline while the offense sputtered. Drives stalled. Momentum died. And rather than letting Sanders try to push through it, Stefanski's body language said everything. Arms crossed. No real engagement. No visible coaching. No quarterback-head coach synergy. Just silence. In one game, the Browns went 3-and-out multiple times with safe, low-risk play calls. Sanders didn't even get the chance to go off script or adjust. When the camera cut to him on the sideline, he wasn't angry. He looked confused, like someone waiting to be trusted, but not knowing what more he could do to earn it. That kind of disconnect doesn't just appear overnight. It's built, week by week, in environments where belief is optional. Cleveland's match history this season tells a strange story. Games where Sanders looked poised and moved the offense suddenly veered into conservative coaching spirals. Even with leads, the team refused to let him take over. Even in losses, there were no big changes to the script. The Browns don't just play tight, they play scared. And when your own coach is afraid of your quarterback ceiling, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Meanwhile, opposing coaches speak glowingly of Sanders. They talk about his dual-threat skill set, his maturity, his ability to read defenses. But within Cleveland's building, it's crickets. Stefanski treats every performance like it needs to be justified. And the more he minimizes Sanders' contributions, the more obvious the gap becomes between internal and external perception. When Sanders does talk, there's clarity. No fluff. No drama. Just a quarterback who wants to win and is willing to shoulder blame when things go wrong. But over time, that humility can start to sound like resignation. In recent pressers, Sanders has sounded less upbeat, more measured. He deflects questions about the offense, avoids any hint of criticism, and steers away from emotional language. That's not a lack of passion. It's the sound of someone being careful. Careful not to rock the boat. Careful not to call out a system that isn't working for him. And yet, the patience he's showing is also what makes McDermott's praise so pointed. Because it shines a light on just how little Sanders has been given, despite doing everything the right way. Stefanski, on the other hand, continues to double down on process language. We're focused on execution. Every player has a role. We evaluate everything. It's corporate speak dressed as coaching, and it's starting to wear thin. None of those lines address the elephant in the room, that Shedeur Sanders is outperforming expectations without any meaningful structural support. Stefanski's refusal to name Sanders as a franchise quarterback isn't just conservative, it's negligent. You don't withhold belief from your quarterback until they hit some invisible benchmark. You help them hit that benchmark. That's what coaching is. McDermott knows it. The league sees it. The fans feel it. Stefanski is the only one still pretending that playing it safe is some sort of plan. Even Myles Garrett, Cleveland's defensive anchor and locker room leader, has publicly supported Sanders. In post-game interviews, Garrett's been more generous than his coach, calling Sanders a competitor and locked in. That kind of respect from a veteran star carries weight. Garrett knows what leadership looks like, and he recognizes that Sanders is showing it. This matters because veteran support can often fill the void where coaching falls short. But it shouldn't have to. Garrett's respect for Sanders stands in contrast to Stefanski's non-answers. And when a star player has more confidence in your rookie quarterback than your own head coach, it only reinforces how broken the dynamic really is. Back in preseason, there were signs this story might unfold the way it has. Sanders had solid showing poise under pressure and handling the pace of the pro game well. But Stefanski never leaned into it. Even when Sanders made tough throws or extended plays, the coach's tone afterward was cold, muted, detached. Other rookie quarterbacks around the league were being celebrated for flashes. Sanders was being managed like a risk. And now, months later, nothing's changed. McDermott's praise made one thing crystal clear. The rest of the league sees what Sanders is becoming. The Browns still act like he's an intern on a trial period. In the matchup against Miami, Sanders had one of his sharper games, clean mechanics, quick decisions, and efficient drives. But even then, Stefanski's play calling felt like it had training wheels. Key moments were wasted with conservative schemes. Red zone trips were sabotaged by indecisiveness from the sideline. And afterward, the same robotic response. We had some good moments. That was it. No mention of the throws Sanders threaded in tight windows. No acknowledgement of his clock management. No recognition that he kept the game competitive despite poor coaching choices. The message, intentional or not, was loud. Play well, and you might get a shrug. Struggle, and you'll carry the blame. Against the Raiders, the game plan looked like sabotage. Sanders barely had time to throw. The line broke down, the playbook was dull, and there were no adjustments made to give him breathing room. But again, no help came. The Browns kept calling the same slow-developing plays, ignoring the defensive pressure, and refusing to lean into Sanders' mobility. He still found ways to fight. Extended plays. Moved the chains. Stayed calm. But the support never came. And when asked about the offensive plan afterward, Stefanski brushed it off with more vague strategy talk. The unwillingness to adapt wasn't just bad coaching. It was a reminder that Sanders is thriving in spite of the system, not because of it. As the weeks pile up, Shedeur Sanders' press conferences have started to feel heavier. He's still composed, still respectful, still saying all the right things, but the optimism has thinned. When asked about growth, he talks about learning moments. When asked about confidence, he says it comes from preparation. What he never says is whether he feels supported. And that omission is becoming impossible to ignore. This is where Sean McDermott's comments land the hardest. Because Sanders shouldn't need validation from an opposing head coach to confirm what's obvious. McDermott didn't hype him up for fun. He acknowledged what the tape shows. Sanders makes Cleveland harder to defend. That's not opinion. That's preparation. And it raises the question of why Cleveland's own leadership refuses to say the same thing out loud. Kevin Stefanski continues to insist that nothing is wrong. Every time the subject comes up, he falls back on structure, process, and evaluation. But leadership isn't just about what you say. It's about what you refuse to say. Stefanski refuses to publicly commit to Sanders as the guy. He refuses to adjust his tone, even when Sanders shows growth. And that refusal sends a message throughout the organization. Players hear it. Fans feel it. And quarterbacks internalize it. This isn't about demanding praise. It's about alignment. McDermott showed alignment. He showed that when a quarterback makes your job harder, you respect it. Stefanski's silence, by contrast, feels like distance. And distance between a head coach and a young quarterback is where careers stall. Looking across Cleveland's season, the pattern is consistent. Whenever Sanders builds momentum, the offense slows him down. Whenever he shows command, the system pulls him back. It's not just conservative, it's restrictive. And in today's NFL, where quarterbacks thrive on rhythm and trust, that kind of environment suffocates development. McDermott's comments didn't just highlight Sanders' talent. They exposed Cleveland's philosophy. One team prepares for greatness. The other hesitates around it. And the longer that hesitation continues, the more damage it does, not just to Sanders, but to the Browns' future. Because windows in the NFL close fast, and wasted development time never comes back. Despite all of this, Sanders keeps showing up. He doesn't throw teammates under the bus. He doesn't complain about play calling. He doesn't deflect responsibility. He plays, he prepares, and he speaks with maturity well beyond his years. That resilience is exactly what McDermott praised indirectly: toughness, composure, and threat awareness. But resilience shouldn't be confused with acceptance. Sanders' patience doesn't mean the situation is sustainable. It means he's professional. And professionalism can only carry a quarterback so far when the infrastructure around him refuses to evolve. The danger isn't that Sanders can't overcome adversity. The danger is that Cleveland is manufacturing. This is the crossroads. Either the Browns confront the reality that their quarterback is ahead of schedule and deserves real investment, or they continue pretending that caution equals control. Sean McDermott didn't say anything outrageous. He said what competent organizations say when they recognize talent. And in doing so, he made Cleveland's silence impossible to defend. If the Browns don't change course, this won't end quietly. Because the league is watching. Coaches are watching. And eventually, opportunities move where belief lives. If Cleveland refuses to be that place, someone else will step in and reap the benefits. If you're watching this unfold and seeing the same red flags, make sure to let your voice be heard. Like the video if you think Shedeur Sanders deserves real support. Share it with other fans following this situation. Drop your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more breakdowns as this story continues to develop.